A modest woman in a simple cream dress ascends the marble steps of the prestigious Monarch Chess Society, drawing curious and judgmental stares. Alexander Reed, the club champion, challenges her to a match, intending to humiliate her for the entertainment of his peers. The crowd gathers, eager to witness another victim fall to Alexander's calculated cruelty. But when Eleanor Wright moves her first piece, the smug smile fades from Alexander's face. With each deliberate move, she dismantles his defenses, revealing a brilliant mind behind her unassuming appearance. What the arrogant chess master and his elite audience didn't know was that the woman they mocked was once a chess prodigy who had walked away from fame. Now they would learn a powerful lesson about looking beyond appearances, as Eleanor proves that true mastery requires neither pretension nor status. The Monarch Chess Society stood like a fortress of intellectual elitism on Madison Avenue, its limestone steps and ornate oak doors designed to impress and intimidate. Inside, the rich walnut furniture, crystal chandeliers, and the persistent scent of expensive cologne created an atmosphere of exclusivity that had defined the club since 1925. On this particular Thursday evening, the club hummed with its usual activity. Men in tailored suits and women in designer dresses moved chess pieces with practiced precision, their voices never rising above a cultured murmur. Alexander Reed sat at his usual table, his steel-gray eyes scanning the room like a king surveying his dominion. At 45, Alexander was the club's reigning champion, a title he guarded with the ferocity of a lion protecting its pride. His perfectly coiffed silver hair and immaculately pressed charcoal suit spoke of money and privilege, as did the custom gold cufflinks shaped like chess knights that adorned his wrists. Another tedious evening, he sighed to William Blackwood, a fellow member who stood beside him. No one worth playing these days. William chuckled. Perhaps you've simply outgrown the competition. Alexander smiled, but the expression didn't reach his eyes. Perhaps. The club's heavy double doors swung open, momentarily flooding the dimly lit room with the harsh glow of streetlights. In walked a woman who seemed oddly out of place in the rarefied atmosphere of the Monarch. Eleanor Wright paused just inside the entrance, her amber eyes taking in the scene before her. At 37, she had the quiet confidence of someone comfortable in her own skin. Her simple cream button-up dress cinched at the waist with a worn leather belt was a stark contrast to the opulence surrounding her. Her chestnut hair was pulled back in a practical bun, not a strand out of place, yet without the style perfection that characterized the other women present. "May I help you?" The receptionist's tone carried a barely concealed suggestion that Eleanor had taken a wrong turn somewhere. "I'm looking for Professor Thomas Edwards," Eleanor replied, her voice steady and clear. "He asked me to meet him here at 8. The receptionist's perfectly arched eyebrows rose slightly. "Professor Edwards is running late. He called to say he's been delayed at the university. You're welcome to wait, though I'm not sure." She trailed off, eyeing Eleanor's attire with thinly veiled disapproval. "Thank you. I'll wait." Eleanor moved past the reception desk, ignoring the curious glances that followed her. She found an empty chair near the corner of the main playing area and sat down, her posture relaxed yet dignified. Her eyes roamed over the various games in progress, studying moves and positions with a quiet intensity that went unnoticed by most. Alexander Reed, however, had noticed the newcomer immediately. Something about the way she observed the games with focused attention, rather than the casual interest of a novice, piqued his curiosity. "Who's that?" he asked William, nodding toward Eleanor. William shrugged. "No idea. Clearly doesn't belong here. Probably someone's assistant or a lost tourist." Alexander's lips curled into a smile that held no warmth. "She's watching the games like she understands them." "Doubtful," William scoffed. "Probably just fascinated by the shiny pieces." Alexander chuckled, but his eyes remained fixed on Eleanor. There was something about her, a quiet dignity perhaps, that irritated him. In his world, People like her knew their place and didn't venture into spaces like the Monarch unless they were serving drinks or cleaning floors. I think, Alexander said slowly, rising from his seat, that we might have found some entertainment for the evening after all. William followed his gaze and smiled. Oh, this should be good. Alexander made his way across the room, his movements deliberate and unhurried. Members noticed his trajectory and whispered among themselves. Alexander approaching an outsider was unusual enough to warrant attention. Eleanor remained focused on a nearby match, seemingly oblivious to the approaching storm. The game she watched was nearing its conclusion, a queenside attack that would lead to checkmate in 5 moves, though the defending player hadn't realized it yet. Enjoying the view, Alexander's voice cut through her concentration. Eleanor looked up, her expression neutral. Yes, thank you. You play. The question carried a hint of mockery. A little, she replied, her tone giving nothing away. Alexander's smile widened. A little, he repeated, as if savoring a private joke. How charming. By now, a small crowd had gathered, curious about Alexander's interest in this plainly dressed woman who had wandered into their sanctuary. I'm Alexander Reed, he announced, watching for the recognition his name usually evoked. Club champion for the past 8 years. Eleanor Wright, she replied simply, offering neither congratulations nor impression. Alexander's smile faltered momentarily before returning with renewed condescension. Well, Eleanor Wright, since you enjoy watching, perhaps you'd care to play a game. I so rarely get the opportunity to introduce newcomers to the finer points of chess. The invitation dripped with false courtesy. Around them, club members exchanged knowing looks. Alexander's introductions were legendary. Quick, brutal dismantlings that left opponents embarrassed and the audience entertained. That's very kind, Eleanor said, but I'm waiting for someone. Oh, it won't take long, Alexander insisted, his voice hardening slightly. Just a friendly game to pass the time. The crowd had grown larger. Alexander's challenges were a form of theater at the Monarch, a reminder of the hierarchy that existed within these walls. Eleanor hesitated, her eyes scanning the room. The receptionist was watching with barely concealed amusement. Several members had abandoned their games to witness what promised to be an entertaining humiliation. I'd really rather not, Eleanor said firmly. Alexander's expression darkened. Surely you're not afraid of a little chess game? You said you play. I said I'd play a little, Eleanor corrected him. There's a difference. A soft ripple of laughter spread through the onlookers. Alexander's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. One game, he pressed, unless you find our club beneath your abilities. The sarcasm in his voice was unmistakable. Eleanor sighed, recognizing the corner she was being pushed into. Refusing further would only create more of a scene. Very well, Mr. Reed. One game. Alexander's triumphant smile returned as he gestured toward a vacant table in the center of the room. Excellent. Shall we? As Eleanor rose to follow him, the club's main doors opened again. Professor Thomas Edwards, a distinguished man in his early 70s with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, entered and paused, taking in the scene before him. Eleanor, he called out, moving quickly toward her. I see you've met some of our members. Yes, Eleanor's face brightened with genuine warmth. Mr. Reed has challenged me to a game while I waited. Thomas's eyes widened slightly as he looked between Eleanor and Alexander. Has he indeed? There was a note of concern in his voice, but also something else, a glimmer of anticipation. Just a friendly match, Alexander said smoothly, to welcome your friend to our club. Thomas hesitated, then nodded slowly. Well then, this should be interesting. He turned to Eleanor. Do you feel up to it? We could leave if you prefer. Eleanor held his gaze for a moment, then shook her head. It's just one game, Thomas. Very well, Thomas said, taking a step back to join the growing audience. Just remember what I taught you. Alexander's eyebrows shot up at this exchange, but he said nothing as he guided Eleanor to the table. The chess table at the center of the room stood under the direct glow of a crystal chandelier, its marble surface gleaming under the light. The chess pieces, hand-carved from Italian alabaster and onyx, were arranged in perfect formation, soldiers awaiting commands from their generals. Alexander gestured for Eleanor to take the seat facing the white pieces. "Ladies first," he said with exaggerated courtesy. Eleanor sat down, her movements unhurried. She adjusted her chair slightly, then ran her fingers lightly over the white king, feeling its smooth contours. There was familiarity in her touch that didn't escape Thomas's notice. The crowd had grown to include nearly everyone present in the club that evening. They formed the circle around the table, their expectations clear. They had come to witness a slaughter, not a match. "Standard tournament rules?" Eleanor asked, her voice even. Alexander's eyebrows lifted in mild surprise. "You're familiar with tournament play." "As I said, I play little." A few chuckles rippled through the audience. Alexander nodded, settling into his chair with the confidence of a man who has never known defeat in this room. "Tournament rules it is. Clock set to 20 minutes each." He gestured to William, who stepped forward with a professional chess clock and set it on the table. Eleanor adjusted the white pieces, aligning them with precision. Her hands moved with practiced ease, but few in the audience noticed this detail, distracted as they were by the anticipation of watching Alexander's usual performance. "You know," Alexander said conversationally as he arranged his black pieces, "I usually give newcomers some advantage. A piece handicap perhaps. Would you like that?" The question was designed to sting, to establish dominance before the first move was even made. Several members smirked, expecting Eleanor to either accept the handicap or bristle at the insult. Instead, she simply shook her head. "That won't be necessary, thank you." Alexander shrugged. "As you wish." The chess clock was set. The board was ready. All eyes were on Eleanor as she contemplated her opening move. The weight of expectation hung heavy in the air, mingled with the scent of expensive perfume and silent judgment. In that moment, something shifted in Eleanor's demeanor, subtle but unmistakable to those paying close attention. Her shoulders squared ever so slightly, her gaze, when it met Alexander's, held a clarity and focus that hadn't been there before. Thomas Edwards stood at the edge of the circle, his expression inscrutable save for the slightest hint of a smile at the corners of his mouth. Eleanor reached forward and moved her pawn to e4, a standard opening, but executed with a fluidity that spoke of countless repetitions. Alexander responded quickly with his knight took 6, an unconventional but aggressive counter. Eleanor paused, studying the board. The crowd watched, some already losing interest in what they assumed would be a quick and predictable game. Then she moved her knight to f3, and something in the deliberate precision of her movement caused Alexander to look up from the board to her face. "An interesting choice," he remarked, trying to maintain his air of superiority. "Every choice in chess should be interesting," Eleanor replied, her voice taking on a new depth. "Otherwise, why play?" Alexander's eyes narrowed slightly as he considered his next move. He pushed his pawn to d5, attempting to control the center. Without hesitation, Eleanor moved her bishop to c4, pinning Alexander's knight against his king. A murmur rippled through the spectators. The move was aggressive, strategic, and undeniably skilled. Alexander stared at the board, the beginning of a frown forming between his brows. This was not proceeding as he had anticipated. "Your mentor has taught you some basics, I see," he said, attempting to regain psychological control. Eleanor didn't respond, her focus entirely on the game before her. The match had begun in earnest, and the audience that had gathered for a quick execution now found themselves witnessing what appeared to be the opening moves of a genuine contest. 20 minutes into the game, the atmosphere in the room had transformed. What began as a spectacle of anticipated humiliation had evolved into a match of unexpected intensity. The hushed whispers that circulated through the audience carried notes of surprise and grudging admiration. Alexander's confident smile had long since disappeared, replaced by the intense concentration of a man facing a worthy opponent. His forehead glistened with a light sheen of perspiration as he contemplated his next move. The board before them told the story of a battle where neither player yielded easily. Eleanor had sacrificed a knight to gain positional advantage, a bold strategy that spoke of advanced understanding. Alexander had countered skillfully, but found himself continuously responding to her initiatives rather than creating his own. "Check," Eleanor said quietly, moving her bishop diagonally across the board. Alexander shifted his king out of danger, his movements less fluid than before. A muscle in his jaw twitched, a tell that Thomas recognized from years of observing players under pressure. "You've played before," Alexander stated, no longer a question, but an accusation. Eleanor lifted her eyes from the board briefly. "I mentioned that I play a little." "A little," he repeated her words with obvious sarcasm. "This isn't playing a little, Ms. Wright." Eleanor returned her attention to the board without responding. Her next move advanced a pawn, seemingly innocuous, but strategically forcing Alexander's bishop into a retreating position. The clock ticked. Alexander had used 15 of his 20 minutes, while Eleanor had used only 8. Time pressure began to weigh on him, adding to the psychological strain. William Blackwood leaned toward another member, whispering, "Where did she learn to play like that?" The question rippled through the gathered crowd. Thomas Edwards stood with arms crossed, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. When the club president approached him with raised eyebrows, Thomas simply shrugged. "Some people are naturally gifted," he said loud enough for those nearby to hear. Alexander's next move betrayed his growing frustration, an aggressive push that left a weakness in his defense. Eleanor noted it immediately, her expression unchanging, as she capitalized on the error, sliding her rook into a threatening position. "Check," she said again. Alexander moved his king to safety, but the cost was high, his position deteriorating further. 3 moves later, Alexander stared at the board in disbelief. His king was trapped with no legal moves remaining. "Checkmate," Eleanor announced softly. The room fell silent, the collective breath of the audience held in stunned disbelief. Alexander Reed, 8-time club champion, had been defeated in 27 moves by a woman no one recognized, dressed in a simple cream dress with a worn leather belt. The silence that engulfed the room was profound, broken only by the soft sound of Eleanor resetting her pieces to their original positions. Alexander remained frozen, staring at the board as if expecting the pieces to rearrange themselves into a less damning configuration. "That was," he began, his voice uncharacteristically uncertain, unexpected. Eleanor looked up, meeting his gaze directly for the first time. "Would you like another game, Mr. Reed?" "I believe the traditional response to a defeat is to offer congratulations and request a rematch." Her words, delivered without malice, but with unmistakable confidence, sent a ripple of reactions through the crowd. Some gasped softly, others exchanged wide-eyed glances, and a few, particularly those who had experienced Alexander's arrogance firsthand, suppressed smiles. Alexander's face flushed. He glanced around, suddenly aware of being the center of attention for all the wrong reasons. The hunter had become the hunted, the entertainer now the entertainment. "Ah yes, of course," he managed, straightening his posture. "A rematch. Though perhaps we should make it interesting. A wager, perhaps." Eleanor's expression cooled. "I don't play for money, Mr. Reed." "Not money," he clarified quickly. "Information. If I win, you tell us who you really are and where you learned to play like that. And if you win—" He paused, realizing he had nothing to offer that she seemed to want. "If I win," Eleanor continued for him, "you'll stop challenging unsuspecting visitors to this club for your entertainment." Alexander blinked, caught off guard by her awareness of his usual tactics. Behind Eleanor, Thomas couldn't suppress a proud smile. "Deal," Alexander agreed, reaching for the black pieces again. "But I'll take white this time." As they reset the board, the crowd grew larger. Word had spread throughout the club, drawing members from the bar and reading rooms. Even the staff paused in their duties, finding excuses to linger near the match. "She beat Alexander," whispered a newcomer to the gathering. "Impossible," replied another. "I saw it with my own eyes." The rematch began with Alexander playing aggressively from the start, determined to establish dominance quickly and erase the memory of his defeat. Eleanor responded with calm precision, the moves revealing a deep understanding of classical strategy. 10 moves in, club member Jonathan Hayes leaned toward Thomas. "She's extraordinary. Where did you find her?" Thomas smiled enigmatically. "I didn't find Eleanor. She was my student many years ago, before she changed paths." "Student? She could be teaching here." Thomas nodded. Indeed she could. On the board, the battle intensified. Alexander sacrificed a pawn for initiative, but Eleanor's counterattack revealed the move as premature. Gradually, inexorably, the position shifted in her favor once again. The whispers grew louder. The audience was no longer watching for Alexander's triumph, but witnessing Eleanor's mastery unfold. The rematch concluded even more decisively than the first game. Alexander's final desperate attempt to salvage a draw was met with a combination so elegant that several members murmured in appreciation. "Checkmate in 3, Eleanor announced quietly. Alexander stared at the board, then slowly tipped his king over in resignation, unable to deny the inevitable. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice a mixture of frustration and genuine curiosity. Eleanor glanced at Thomas, who gave her a slight nod of encouragement. "Just someone who loves chess, Mr. Reed," she replied, rising from her seat. "And now, if you'll excuse me, Thomas, and I have dinner plans." But Alexander wasn't prepared to let her leave so easily. "Wait," he insisted, standing up. "I've played grandmasters who couldn't dismantle a position like you just did. You're not just someone who loves chess." The room had grown silent again, all eyes on Eleanor. Thomas stepped forward. "Perhaps I can shed some light," he offered, though I suspect a few of our older members might already recognize Eleanor Wright, formerly Eleanor Barnes. A collective gasp rose from several gray-haired members in the back. "The prodigy," someone exclaimed. "The one who disappeared before the international championship." Thomas nodded. 20 years ago, Eleanor was the most promising young player I'd ever coached. She qualified for the international championship at 15. Alexander's expression transformed as recognition dawned. "Barnes, I studied your matches. They're in textbooks now. But you vanished before the finals. Everyone thought many things," Eleanor interrupted gently, "none of which matter now." She turned to Thomas. "Shall we?" Thomas offered his arm. "Your performance hasn't suffered from lack of tournament play," he observed as they walked toward the exit. Eleanor smiled. "I never stopped playing, Thomas. I just stopped playing for an audience." The club members parted before them, faces reflecting newfound respect as they passed. As Eleanor and Thomas reached the doors, Alexander called out, "Ms. Wright, Ms. Barnes, wait." They paused, turning to find Alexander approaching, his earlier arrogance replaced by something resembling humility. "I owe you an apology," he said, the words clearly unfamiliar on his tongue. "I was unprofessional and unkind." Eleanor regarded him thoughtfully. "Apology accepted, Mr. Reed. Would you consider coming back? Perhaps giving a lecture or demonstration? The club would benefit enormously from your insights." Thomas watched Eleanor carefully, noting the brief flash of consideration in her eyes before she shook her head. "I appreciate the offer, but no. I have a full life teaching elementary school mathematics. Chess is my sanctuary, not my profession. Alexander looked genuinely disappointed. At least tell me why. You could have been world champion. Elena smiled, a genuine expression that softened her features. I discovered that I valued my love for the game more than I valued winning. The pressure was changing chess from a passion into an obligation. She glanced around at the opulent surroundings. There's beauty in chess played for the right reasons, Mr. Reed. When it becomes about status or humiliating others, that beauty fades. Alexander nodded slowly, absorbing her words. Your wager, Eleanor reminded him gently. No more ambushing unsuspecting visitors. You have my word, Alexander replied, extending his hand. Eleanor shook it firmly, then turned to leave with Thomas. As the doors closed behind them, the murmur of conversation resumed inside the club, but something had changed. At tables throughout the room, members replayed the game moves from memory, discussing strategies and combinations with renewed enthusiasm. And Alexander Reed returned to his usual table, pulled out a notebook, and began to write, not to record another victory, but to preserve the lessons learned from an unexpected teacher in a simple cream dress. Sometimes the most extraordinary talent hides in plain sight, beneath unassuming exteriors and quiet demeanors. True mastery isn't about accolades or status. It's about the passion that drives us to excel, even when no one is watching. Has someone ever underestimated you, only to regret it later? We all have hidden depths that others may not see at first glance. Eleanor's story reminds us to approach others with humility and openness, for we never know what brilliance might be sitting across from us, quietly waiting to be discovered.